cornerstone. I am the original cornerstone. The cornerstone. I am the original cornerstone. The cornerstone. I am the original cornerstone. The cornerstone. I am the original cornerstone. Don't do love, yeah. See, can't be love, yeah. Even if you should love, yeah. They can't be love, yeah. They have no ways. Sweet and convincing in the beginning. Two faces of evil and oppression. True face of negatives and suppression. They have no ways. Sweet and convincing in the beginning. Two faces of evil and oppression. Two faces of evil and oppression. But I am the cornerstone. I am the original cornerstone. The cornerstone. I am the original cornerstone. Polarity. The paradoxes and the ugliness of vanity. Polarity. The paradoxes and the ugliness of vanity. Destroying the blueprint so no one can see who is the original and who is the copy. Destroying the blueprint so no one can see who is the original. They can't be love, yeah. See, even if you show up, yeah. They can't be love, yeah. See, they don't do love, yeah. They can't be love, yeah. Even if you should love, yeah. Instead of Jah at the head, mankind at the head, manipulating to stay ahead. Instead of Jah at the head, mankind at the head, manipulating to stay ahead. Can't be love, yeah. You see, even if you should love, yeah. They don't do love, yeah.
All right, family. Greetings. Welcome to another edition of Baba TV Every Time Fire, and it took me a minute to get this live stream together. I haven't done a live stream in so long. I'm back to being on the street, which is really how I like it anyway. That's how I started out on the street before all this live stream business started taking place. Make us lazy. We need to get out amongst the people, you know, so we can feel the vibe of the people. With that being said, this brother of mine needs no introduction on Baba TV. He starts a fire every time he comes on here. They don't want his information on Facebook. They don't want him on YouTube. And that should tell you something. That should tell you something. If they're taking his information down where damn near wherever I put it is something that he's saying, and what he's saying he backs up with receipts, facts, proof, and evidence. And this is what they don't like. And so it's a pleasure. We've been wrangling, trying to get back on Baba TV. His schedule wouldn't always permit, and mine wouldn't always permit, but that's okay. We got a lot to talk about today. It's a lot of civil unrest, a lot of dissatisfaction going on in the world today. I'm not going to do too much rambling. My thoughts on everything is, you know, this country was built on bloodshed, war, deceit, thievery, and lying. And so, you know, there should be no surprise when, you know, dissatisfaction reaches a certain level. It will produce 100% change in the universe. So with that in mind, I don't want to go too far. I want to introduce to some and present to others somebody who I've known since he was a teen in Washington, D.C., a young brother of mine. We struggled together in the Rastafarian community in Washington, D.C. You've heard me speak about this several times. For you, those of you who don't know, we were vendors at midnight shows, bringing comedic information to the people. He's been to Brooklyn with me, Harlem with me. He's no stranger to Baba Heru and a lot of the elders, believe it or not, to you younger ones. He's been out there for quite a while now. He's in Oregon now and has his own radio show, which you should check out on WKSKQ, Oregon. The BAMBU King, his reggae segment that's on for 2 hours every Wednesday between 6 and 8 Eastern Standard Time. Wait for him to come back on here. Yeah, it's a lot going on in the universe. All right.
My tea was calling me. I didn't want it to ruin our spot.
So, with that being said, that's just a little preamble for those that may not know the BAMBU King. As I say, I want to introduce to some and present to others my brother, the BAMBU King. Give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up.
Yo, Hotep Poo, Brother Baba, enough respect due. Thank you so much. In the Baba TV universe, every time fire. That's why we're here. We're not trying to bring too much lightweight stuff, foam and cream and none of them things. We want a black coffee scalding hot. So we try to bring what we got, with a little bit of originality to it and do what we can. And I just want to thank you so very much. And I'm going to apologize out the gate. I'm just recovering from like a sinus chest cold type of thing last couple days. Nothing bad, nothing serious, but it got me a little, throaty and mucusy and stuff. So I'm going to apologize if I'm coughing and snotting around and trying to do my tea as well. But felt that, it was a very timely situation where we're at is kind of like simultaneous war horn and air raid siren, warning siren is why we're here today. I know it's been a long time since I've been on Baba TV, and that's solely on me. That's solely on me and not getting my schedule in line to be able to come and connect with the family here with what's on my mind and heavy on my heart and what's going on in the world. I mean, it's such a rapid clip that every time I have an idea of something I want to talk about, 5, 6, 7 huge global events happen that kind of derail my train of thought as to what should be done and who should be saying anything about it. In all honesty, a lot of times I feel about myself, like, who am I to try to extend a hand of correction to anyone or a hand of guidance to anyone when I feel just as lost in this place as just about everybody. And so I've been wrestling with a lot of things with myself, and which I didn't want to burden Baba with the disorganization of. I didn't want to burden the Baba TV universe with hearing, conflicting information or conflicting presentation of information, as it were. And weeks led to months, months led to years, and there's really no excuse. But look who's here. We're here together. All of us are here together, and anyone who can watch in retrospect this presentation, we're going to do our best to not make it long, try to make it strong, and at the very least meaningful and heartfelt as we try to do. But I just want to thank and so much gratitude, Baba, for not just bringing me on, but for everyone that you bring on your platform and extend your platform the freedom to express their opinions and their perspective and share with the community from the grassroots right on up to the ripe fruits, information that's very relevant, and the street consciousness that permeates here on Baba TV. You're not going to get anywhere else in the manner that it's presented here. So, I want to thank you for all your hard work and pounding the pavement to get to where the people actually are, where you live and beyond. And you can hear the cries and call for help and woes of hopelessness are at a fever pitch right now. And, some things have just gone down in the last couple of days that I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to touch on a couple things. like I say, this isn't going to be like a complete presentation the way we normally do. This is kind of just shooting from the hip, talking off the top of the head of some of the things that we're seeing today. And Baba, if you got you want to steer it in any direction you want to, with some questions and all that, please feel free to, interject and, shut me up for a minute to get some other thoughts across and all that. Please feel free to do that, Baba. I just appreciate you having me here.
No problem, my brother. Start it right off. Anything that's on your heart, go right ahead. You start it off.
Okay. Well, something that really inspired me to say, we need to have a red flag on this moment is because there's a fella that go by the name of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, he's a political, he's a podcaster, he's a radio guy, he's a political activist, he's like a neoconservative, not even so much a extremist. He's more of a middle of the road Republican conservative type. And I'm not a fan. I'm gonna be straight up. I'm not a fan. I don't believe in his perspectives. I don't trust the integrity of his presentation. I don't think he's right. I think he's a big part of the problem of what's going on in the world today, in this country today, in the sense of exacerbating a culture war, exacerbating the many facets of the culture war, seeding more intolerance and lack of compassion and lack of a willingness to combine and galvanize the energies of diverse walks of life against the common enemy, which is our government, which is more of a puppet show for the military-industrial complex and the espionage industry, like the CIA or the CIA in America, the Mossad in Israel, the DGSE in France, the MI6 in England. These various branches of this rotten tree, or these various arms of the one octopus of totalitarian control and the espionage industry, seeding terrorism across the globe, manufacturing false flags and psychological operations in order to put the population, the civilian population and the citizenry of all of these various nations against one another, and in particular, at a local level and domestic level, pinning us as Americans against one another and seeing one another as the actual enemy, cause and source of the problem, instead of, workers' rights, affordable health care for the masses, affordable education for the masses, affordable trade school for the masses, a depreciating economy. Basically, the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. As my brother Excalibur from St. Croix says, gone up, everything gone up except the poor man's pay. That's why the system corrupt. And that's where we're at today. But what it seems to be is that there's political personality, not necessarily establishment pundits, but in the wake of the destruction of the establishment media, because the establishment media is collapsing. No one's watching CNN, MSNBC, Fox News to get their news, except older people who are on their way out anyway. And it's a redundant form of media at this point, because so many people, younger people in particular, and anyone who's willing to have the courage to pay enough attention knows that all of these industries are completely corrupted, co-opted, and compromised through the manipulation of these intelligence agencies. Whether I'd like to just say the CIA and a lot of other three-name agencies that most of us don't even know about, and I don't even know of half of them. NSA, Homeland Security, and rada. But we'll just Central Intelligence Agency, and ironically enough, the Mossad of Israel being their Central Intelligence Agency, a covert intelligence agency, or really espionage agency, which is what facilitates normally, under normal circumstances, allegedly, assassinations and, you know, fighting against dissent, fighting against the dissidents who dare to stand up in opposition to the establishment narrative and the expression of establishment interpretation of reality as the government would have you believe it. And not just the government, because there's many aspects to it, whether you're dealing with the industry of science, industry of medicine, industry of entertainment, industry of music. You know, there's all of these industries. Anything that generates income and develops into an industry, if not already, is soon to be corrupted and compromised in order to benefit the few over the many. And certainly with the entertainment industry, benefit the higher ups instead of those producing the art and with the talent that is actually the commodity that is bought and sold at an international level. But that's probably more of a conversation, different conversation for a different time. But where we're at is up until this morning when I woke up, Charlie Kirk, he's a political activist, political speaker, prolific political speaker. As a young man, 19 years old, he started an organization called Turning Points. Once again, white-minded, white, heterosexual, Christian sympathies only, a very mocking critique against minorities, against immigrants, against immigration, against welfare, against anyone who's not himself, ultimately, which is part of the problem, not just for the Charlie Kirks of the world, but for each and every one of us who feels as though we have no capacity in our heart to tolerate anyone other than a spitting image reflection of ourselves and our own ideologies. That's not the road to a happy nation. That's not the road to a safe and secure nation. That's the road to more chaos and more animosity and more contempt and more frustration and intolerance and infighting against ourselves, while the rich get richer, the State Street, the Vanguard, the BlackRocks, the Larry Finks, the Larry Ellison, the Jeff Bezoses and Bill Gates of the world, the Elon Musk rats of the world, get richer and richer and richer off of our contempt for one another, while we get poorer and poorer and poorer. And the cost of fuel goes up, and the cost of food goes up, and the cost of rent goes up. And if we're lucky, in 20 years, we might see minimum wage rise $2 or $3. But chances are by then we'll be outpaced on how much we can even afford. I saw a statistic very recently saying that the new home purchasing power for a minimum wage earner in 2025 compared to the 1970s, meaning the exchange rate for how much the cost of utilities, cost of groceries, cost to purchase a new home, cost to live in a new home, compared to the minimum wage income of 1970s compared to 2025, we would need, the minimum wage earner would need to be making $66 an hour in order to equate the new home purchasing power of the 1970s for the low income earner. So that's where we're at. You know, that's where we're at. We're at a place where the poor have no chance. And when you see Gen Z and millennials, you see how they have absolutely no chance at working hard and picking yourself up by your bootstraps, whatever these slogans people cling to, these antiquated slogans that never meant anything when the first redundant moron said them out of the lion mouth. When they say it again in 2025, you can't equate the experience of a boomer growing up in the 60s and 70s with what Gen Z is dealing with today, because it's completely apples and watermelons. It's completely different. It's a completely different circumstance and situation. So anyway, 2 days ago, or September 10th, the precursor to the ritualistic murder day or ritualistic death day of September 11th, is Charlie Kirk was speaking in Utah at one of his many conventions. Once again, he started the group Turning Point. He's brought on to do many interviews on many media channels, many podcasts, independent and not so independent. He has his own podcast and own radio shows and things. He's been working hard for a while. So I'll give credit where credit is due. This isn't a slouch. This isn't someone who sits up in their house and never does anything and wonders why nothing comes to them. This is someone who's been working hard out on his mission. And his mission seems to be defending, the white heterosexual male Christian's place in the modern world, as though it's under tremendous scrutiny, as though it's under tremendous threat by the rest of the world. And there's all sorts of theories as to whether that's true or not true, whether it's valid or invalid. And we're not really going to go into a lot of those theories right now. But the reality is, you've heard me speak, if you've heard me speak on Baba TV in the past, years ago at this point, was I was speaking on my worry of a rise of sort of a new renaissance of white supremacy, a new renaissance of soft white supremacy, meaning not goose-stepping Nazis, not robe-wearing Ku Klux Klan members terrorizing black neighborhoods. No, we're dealing with the rise of a generation of young people who have grown up basically since 9/11, who grew up in the wake of 9/11, and a shift in the time, whereas in the 80s and 90s led way for an opening of the door where white people even were more inclined to listen to the plight of the black community, of more militant voices from the black community, whether it be Malcolm X, whether it be Black Panther, reminiscing on the teachings of the Black Panther Party, old and new, the more radical expressions of observations of how imbalanced a level of inequity America has been a playing field for marginalized minorities, whether it be women, Black Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, Asian and Indian immigrants, whatever. What you have is an era where young white, particularly males, but not just white males, young white males are getting extremely upset about being blamed for everything that's wrong in the world. Every single problem that exists in the world is because white people were so wicked. Every single black thing, every single thing that has happened in the black community that the black community struggles with within their own community is a direct result of slavery and the inequality, slavery, reformation, Jim Crow, civil rights struggle, on and up and up and up. Everything is the white man's fault. And I'm not denying those things. I'm letting you know that there's a whole generation of young white people in America today who, instead of embracing, cracking their consciousness open to understanding a deeper perspective from outside of their own life journey, outside of their own personal struggle within navigating life and nationalism and being American and what that means, and does the Constitution, is it really parallel with what we're seeing in the world and all this stuff? There's a lot of white kids who are angry that white people or them or who they identify with, a white insecurity complex that snowballs into a white supremacy complex, as many people would believe. It's never not been that, but it went into a slumber. It went into a slumber through the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and where it was people worried about being politically incorrect, people worried about being considered a hater, people worried about being called racist or called anti-Semitic or called anti-Black or whatever. So people kind of like buried it inside a little bit more, a lot of them. And now what that has done, you can't bury anything for too long. Now it's turned these people who are now influencers, these millennial people who are now influencers, into advocates for, what is it? Make America great again. Let's get back to the good old days. Let's make it when it was better for me, even if it was worse for everyone that wasn't me, and trying to guise it as some noble pursuit, trying to guise it as some balanced, holistic pursuit. So, this is what I'm calling the renaissance of white ignorance, where it's coming to a head, where it's actually gaining a fan base and getting full steam ahead. And you have a whole generation or two of young white people who feel emboldened to shift the blame of everything that is truly America's fault and the problems in the world that are truly influenced and impacted by America's conduct in the world, and pin the blame for all those things on the nations that they have oppressed, on the people that they have oppressed. I used to use an analogy of like the tip top of the totem pole pointing to the very bottom of the totem pole as the problem. And without any consideration as to how America's conduct for hundreds of years have led to this point of actually acknowledging what is going on in the world today. And I'm not saying that people of other nationalities and within other communities other than white communities are faultless and guiltless in their personal conduct within the world, because we are all as individuals accountable for our actions and words. We're accountable for our actions and words, and we have to take accountability for what it is we do. We don't get to shirk it off on, oh, well, something bad happened to my great-great-granddaddy, so that gives me license to be a dick to everyone in the world. That gives me license to attack and violently abuse strangers in the world, being serial assaultists or serial murderers and everything. Nothing justifies that. That's going to go on your record as the individual. So, but we as individuals who are part of a culture need to take accountability of the actions of said culture and acknowledge it. And as Vaughn Benjamin, who we started the presentation with, which is always beautiful, as Vaughn Benjamin once said at a live show we were at in, I believe, 2001, 2002, he said, there is redemption for the white man, but it begins with his acknowledgement of his role in history and taking accountability for the actions and consequences of said actions as a culture before that redemption can be redeemed. So, some white people have been doing that. Some white people opened up their mind and their heart to like the Native American perspective of American history and the Black American perspective of American history and the US's role in America, victimizing its own people, victimizing the activists of different oppressed and marginalized communities, and the intention that the J. Edgar Hoovers of the world and the CIAs and FBIs of the world intentionally manufacture problems within this nation in order to create more division and discord within the nation. Because the moment we get it together, the moment we figure it out that, yeah, there is one common enemy, and it's the people stealing all your tax money on Capitol Hill. It's the military industrial complex. It's the Department of Defense. Oh, did I misspeak? I guess we're back to the Department of War, which, you know, is a pretty bold and vain move from the so-called peace president to reconvene the Department of War out of the Department of Defense. But genuinely, it's more honest. It's a more honest description of what that department, of the machinations of that department, of the plots and conspiracies of that department, of the pursuits of said department. We haven't even been in a legitimate war in a long time. We haven't even been, I got people coming in now, brother. Man. We haven't even been in a war in a long time. And since World War II was the last actual war that we declared, was the last actual war that we allowed Congress to vote us into being in a war. Every other aspect of all of the wars, Korea, Vietnam, what we've done in Iraq, all the times, what we've done in Afghanistan, what we've been doing in Syria, what we've done every single place since World War II has been considered a military action. So it can subvert being voted into war by Congress, and we can just do whatever we want. And what's going on is you have this strange conundrum within MAGA, the Make America Great Again movement, which is mostly white people. It's mostly white people romanticizing and feigning for a day that they're never going to see again, that they think was actually better for them. But when in reality, for the majority of white people, it wasn't that good to begin with. It wasn't that good for them. It was good for the rich. It was good for the upper class, upper crust. You know, if anything, it was good because they weren't being outright hunted in the street by themselves. But it wasn't of a prolific benefit and a prosperous benefit for the majority of white people in America, because the majority of white people in America were broke and poor and under the poverty line. And now what we have is a far greater majority of white people are finding themselves under the poverty line, and everyone else as well has certainly been there, never been above it, barely, and is now going to a place where our economy is utterly collapsing, and we're about to be switched to a centralized digital currency that is going to be doled out by the government with a nouveau fiat currency that isn't backed by anything, because our current fiat paper currency isn't backed by any gold or anything. It's just backed by loans that were hollow and empty, Federal Reserve and, you know, the Rothschilds and on and on and on. Here we are at the point where we've printed, just after COVID, we printed 40% of the currency that's in circulation right now was printed in 2022, I believe it was. So our money is absolutely worthless, and the illusion of our money holding any value at all is about to be, the mask is about to be taken off. So, and that coupled with AI, replacing the majority of jobs that even exist in this modern reality, because the day of mom and pop stores is over. You know, mom and pop stores were replaced by the Walmarts. Walmarts and Costco's are being replaced by Amazon. All commerce is being done online. There's no opportunity for people to start small businesses anymore because it's unaffordable. The overhead is far too high. The recompense of currency is far too low. And every one of us has to take accountability, once again, that we've become comfortable and complacent in purchasing everything offline from Amazon and the like, you know? So we're not supporting small business people. If it's not you, God bless you. But the majority of us, we're not supporting small businesses. We're not supporting small businesses at all. So we have a whole, not just one industry, but a spectrum of industries that are becoming redundant. And not only is the working class going to be left without a job, as we're seeing happen right now, but the managerial class, The administrative class, the professional business class is about to be made redundant completely, because who needs anything but a smarter computer to design someone's schedule? Who needs someone to do accounting when you have AI doing the accounting? So all of these people who white collar, I won't call them white collar criminals, I'll call them white collar working class, the white collar working class who actually had jobs, didn't just collect mailbox money, but actually went to an office building to work 5-6 days a week and on and on and on. They're without jobs anymore, and rapidly more to come, because AI is replacing this. And we spoke about this at the crossroads. We spoke about the imminent coming of this, and now we're here. Now we're here. So the reason I'm elaborating on any of that is because all of these aspects of struggle, all of these aspects of strain and stress-inducing problems that many of us, including myself, seem to be hopeless to oppose in any kind of way. It's like we're just watching it happen to us without, like we're in some sort of paralysis. We're in some kind of sleep paralysis where we see it happening, but we can't do anything about it. Is how many of us feel. That stress and strain is causing us panic. And in that moment of panic, if we don't have the courage, wherewithal, knowledge, or intuition to look at who's micromanaging these changes in society and abstaining from supporting the change, withholding your support from the change to the best of your ability in order to stay alive, we need a straw man. We need a boogeyman. We need an other. We need someone to blame. Oh, it's the immigrants' fault. They're taking all our jobs. Oh, really? It's the immigrants that are taking your jobs, that are working next to nothing? 5, 6, 7 jobs while you're collecting unemployment, you're collecting disability and sitting there playing Call of Duty in your mama's basement? But you're complaining about all the jobs someone else is doing. So like this is the conflict that we're in. And the most desperate to blame anyone but themselves or the government, that once again, MAGA is really conflicted. They've been listening to Alex Jones. They've been listening to David Icke. They've been listening to people who were willingly, to some capacity, willing to open the criticism and the analysis of critique against our own government and our own way of life. Instead of criticizing that, white Americans are desperate to criticize something else. And MAGA was starting to criticize that. MAGA was starting to say, oh, it's the government doing this and the government doing that and this and that and this. And it's real easy to criticize the government when someone you don't like is in office, when you have a Joe Biden to blame, when you have a Barack Obama to blame. And all those people are garbage. All those people are garbage human beings. They're warmongering corporatists, and none of them should be trusted. We should have never trusted any of them. And sorry, I got to drink a little tea here. And but there's still many Americans who are desperate to believe in something. To believe in, there's got to be some good aspect of our nation. And there's many good aspects. There's many good aspects. Unfortunately, those aspects don't hold on to the power and control of the trajectory of our society. There's many brilliant things that have been born out of the American story. Many of them created by Black Americans. But you're not going to hear them talk about that either. You're not going to hear them give credit where credit is due, about all the inventions and all the developments in technology and all of you might hear by default, you might hear that everyone's favorite musicians and everyone's favorite sport athletes and a lot of people's favorite actors and comedians are Black and everything. That seems to be less of a threat. So they can acknowledge that while still depreciating the value of Black society within the United States. But white Americans, more so than anyone else, particularly poor white Americans, seem to be the most inclined to blame other poor people for their condition, their impoverished condition. Whereas many other poor people can look at the situation and say, well, this is the way it's been. This is the way it's going to keep being. And, you know, this is where we are. They knew nothing before it. And they certainly aren't going to know anything after unless things drastically change. So, saying all that to say, it's led up to this renaissance of empty-headed white ignorance, where people romanticize the ideals of yesteryear. They romanticize the not out of Africa themes. They romanticize the Eurocentric exceptionalism, European exceptionalism, white exceptionalism. They dismiss all of the crimes that have been committed by European nations against South America, against Africa, against India, against China, against everywhere, against America and Canada, so-called. They dismiss all those crimes as being insignificant. They marginalize the severity of it, and they somehow flip it to blame the victims of the inheritance of the victimization of indigenous peoples across the planet, who are actually the pioneers of the very technologies that the few and far between illuminated whites that are only waking up because they've kind of disavowed that Eurocentric exceptionalism ideology in place of listening to what Black people have to teach them, listening to what Native American cultures have to teach them, listening to what ancient Indian cultures had to teach them about health and well-being and spirituality and consciousness and agriculture and technology. Trying to figure out a way to develop technological development coupled with prudence and responsibility. How can we develop technologies that don't destroy the planet? How do we develop technologies that don't rot the minds and hearts and souls of the human that's actually over-consuming said technology? I'm not saying technology is bad. It's like a gun. It can be used to defend innocent people. It can be used to kill innocent people. It's all about the intention of the mind of the hand holding the weapon or tool, depending on whatever the use is. So technology is a blessing, but in turn, it also has become a curse, because just like every other industry, it becomes weaponized against the poor by the few rich, powerful who seek to centralize control and hold on to it, not relinquish it, not creating a more fair and balanced society, not creating a more, you're never going to have a fully utopian society, but something closer resembling a utopian tolerant democracy that actually provides an opportunity for the impoverished, marginalized classes of people to get a leg up in a society that doesn't constantly beat them down into submission while they extract the little bit of wealth they're allowed to obtain in a fraudulent system built on fictitious income. Because ultimately, what's real is your energy. Money is currency. Currency is electricity. Your light, life, heat, energy that you emanate through your existence on this planet is finite. It starts and it ends. And what the energy you generate in that time is the value that your specific life contributes to the planet, that your life contributes to the Akashic record. And as long as you're so afraid of money and paying the rent and keeping the fridge cold and keeping the hot water heater hot, and you're so scared to death of doing anything but working a job for these miners of your light, life, and heat energy, then your life will become wasted. Your irreplaceable life will become wasted in a pursuit to exist in a matrix that is built solely to capture your eternal life into a finite vessel that they can profit off of. So there's a struggle. What I'm trying to emphasize is there's a struggle that white people are going through, and I'm not asking for anyone to be sympathetic to it, but to understand it, to understand that MAGA is a sign. The best thing about Trump as president is he is going to be his own undoing. The best thing about MAGA as a movement is it is going to be its own undoing. Once people start realizing that, oh, this is just as fictitious as the false neoliberalism we've been sold by the Clintons and the Obamas and the Bidens and the Harrises of the world. This is just as false as that, just flipped on its head. That's what's so valuable about it. You need to have it in your face, be as false as it can possibly be. You need to see Trump betray his base and his constituency in every aspect of his platform over and over again, whether it's the economy, whether it's the centralized digital currency that he's handing over to Palantir, whether it's the wars that he said he was going to get us all out of. Now he's just multiplied them. Whether it's you know, even his immigration. He's flip-flopped on his immigration. He said we're going to deport everyone. Didn't really deport many people. He built some theme park prisons like Alligator Auschwitz. He set up over there in Florida that they just shut down and just wasted how many? 500 million on it? Something like that. 500 million? Was it 50 million? 500 million? I don't know, but we just flushed it down the toilet. Just flushed it down the toilet. Because they would rather flush money down the toilet building prisons that don't even hold villains than put people with no families, with no home in a shelter. You know, this society, America, is controlled by satanic, warmongering, greedy, rebellious monsters in human form. We're not going to get into the whole shape-shifting reptoid thing. But I don't see them as human. Because if you have no compassion, if you have no empathy, if you have no ability to feel for those in a terrible condition, whether or not you identify as being part of the problem of their condition, part of the source of the problem of their condition, then I don't consider you a human being. I consider you mankind. You're a kind of a man that resembles a human being, but whose ways and actions are so far removed from anything that could be considered humanitarian or Christian or Hebrew or even Muslim. Peace, salam, salam. They know peace in someone who wants to see others with less while they hoard more and more and more. And even if they're not the ones hoarding more and more and more, that's who they're defending. That's who they're enabling. That's who they're being pro bono lawyers in defense of. They're defending the establishment. They're defending the billionaires. They're defending the oligarchy. They're defending those who reap the reward from deceiving the masses, keeping them dumb, deaf, and blind with no knowledge of themselves nor their purpose in the world. That's who the Charlie Kirks of this world are defending. And 2 days ago, someone took it upon themselves to silence a voice in defense of a rotten society whose day is done and whose time has long been up, in a pursuit to moonwalk us back into an era of white exceptionalism. Now want to be real clear here, because I'm a champion. I'm a supporter and defender, an advocate for freedom of speech. I believe in freedom of speech. I think all the great Black leaders of time immemorable were advocates of freedom of speech, because they knew that if you advocated to silence people's right to express themselves, whether or not they're right, whether or not they're fact-based, whether or not they're speaking off of their own imagination or their own hopes and desires, the moment you silence people legally, change the laws to silence people, even who promote hate speech, then what you've done is you have turned the gun on yourself, and you're the next in the firing line to be silenced because of an expression of your principles, your ideologies, your perspectives that certain people in power may not agree with, or at the very least may not want you to enter into the public record, because they are threatened by what would happen if the majority of people, black, white, candy stripe, trans, not trans, binary, whatever, the moment you start realizing, oh, it's the uber rich versus everybody else. It's not left versus right. It's not Republicans versus Democrats. It's the uber rich versus everyone beneath them. The depopulationists, who up until this point have hoarded all the ill-gotten gains from the working class, and now that they've made the working class an endangered species, soon to be extinct, it's time to depopulate. It's time to exterminate all of them, and then we can have robots be our slaves and our workers in place of humans that tend to put up resistance once you stress them beyond a certain point. The human beings can be radicalized, but they, for some reason, think that they can control the AI. They're gonna find out. They think they can control the robots they're gonna have replace human beings, replace human soldiers. That's what they think they're gonna do. So they need to depopulate all of these rebels, all the sand on the seashore that's more than number, that make the Babylon's knees weak and shake at the thought of what happens when the sleeping giants awake. What happens when the masses come together? They don't have to agree on the same religion. They don't even have to agree on the same history. But once they come together with the idea that we no longer can financially support the system, we no longer can labor laboriously to uphold the continuity of this system, that's what scares them. That's what makes people like you and people like Baba and people like me an enemy of the state. Because the state needs to continue, even though it's going to change form, and rulership will probably change hands to China or wherever else. They need us contained. And honestly, and we're trust me, we're getting to Charlie Kirk in a second. We're getting to Charlie Kirk. The only way to peacefully protest, and it won't end in a peaceful protest, but the only way we're able to peacefully protest this system in the way it operates at the detriment of the citizenry is through not paying your federal income tax, not paying your taxes to it, to finance wars and to finance experimental technologies that are detrimental to the health and well-being of human beings. Finance industries like the FDA and the USDA that allow food to be utterly contaminated and turn a blind eye to it. The only way we can actually fight against the system without getting violent, without doing what, I guess, Tyler Robinson is the name of the person they're trying to pin it on. Still not sold that it's not, because up until this morning when I woke up, I was for sure with no substantive evidence to back it up, hand to my heart, my assumption was deep state agent provocateur initiating a civil war psyop. Deep state agent provocateur initiating a civil war psyop. That's what it looked like to me. Now, are we at a boiling point? Are we at a tipping point in American society where now people are grabbing for their guns? People are grabbing for weapons. People are trying to literally silence people's voices who they don't agree with violently by ending their life? Yeah, I think we're there. I think we've been there. And, you know, even according to the three-letter agencies, 8 out of 10 domestic terrorism incidents are manufactured by the state. 8 out of 10. So, you know, most of what we see as terrorism, whether in America or abroad, most of it is manufactured by the espionage industrial complex. CIA, the FBI, CIA in the United States, MI5, MI6 in the UK, DGSE, DGSI in France, the Mossad, the Shin Bet in Israel. It's like the FBI and the CIA. FBI is domestic, dealing with within the United States. CIA is foreign, dealing with what's going on out there in the world. Manufacturing coups, manufacturing coup d'etats in other nations, manufacturing civil unrest, terrorist cells, funding terrorist cells in Africa, in Northeast Africa, throughout Africa, aligning ourselves, saying we believe in international rules-based order, while we support criminal terrorist organizations like the IDF, supporting nations like Israel, like Saudi Arabia, like the United Arab Emirates, who are financing. The United Arab Emirates are the ones financing all of this civil war, civil discord that's going on in Sudan right now, which is just starving tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to death. And no, you don't hear about it on the media, because that's business as usual. That's just a daily occurrence. Oh, Africa, yeah, they're supposed to be starving. This is the subconscious comforting position of the mind states of people in the West. They're so used to seeing starving Africans that they don't even think about it anymore. And let alone blame anyone but other Africans doing it. Oh, it must just be other Africans doing it. Where you have the United Arab Emirates financing this destruction, the starvation of African children. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Africans dying. Somalia, al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda in Somalia. You have the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, in the north of Ethiopia, trying to overthrow the democratically elected government in Ethiopia right now, with the aid of the United States, with your tax money. So until MAGA has the intellectual morality to be able to acknowledge that all this red, white, and blue, what we gonna do, hot apple pie type of false nationalism, patriotism, until they deal with the conflict in their own heart of, I want to be proud to be American, but I don't agree with what America does with taxpayer money. I don't agree with the wars we get into with taxpayer money. I don't agree with, and most of them, the only thing, like one of my grievances with libertarianism, I got libertarian friends that I can chop it up with and we can walk together on a lot of things. But one of the things that I'm conflicted about the libertarian perspective is that they almost share very little compassion or humanitarian support for any underprivileged class. The way to get to a libertarian's heart is by talking about how their money's being spent. Like it's only a money thing. Like the only grievance they have about Israel is the fact that we're sending Israel $3.8 billion a year and have been forever. It used to be 2.8 when Israel first started in 1948, but it jumped up to 3.8 and we still doing it on top of all the other hundreds of billions of dollars we've given them to genocide the people over in Palestine and the West Bank and Syria and Lebanon and Yemen. You know that Israel in a year has bombed 7 countries in a year with the United States, of course. And that's what MAGA doesn't want to look at. Because there would be no Israel if it wasn't for the United States. If it wasn't for our charitable welfare of the United States and many other European nations, in Germany in particular, of course, and our arming Israel in all of its military pursuits, all of its terrorist actions within the region, there would be no Israel. So there is no Israel without the United States. So the United States and Israel are one and the same. And our ambitions and intentions are one and the same. Destabilize any nation that isn't hand in glove beholden to our interests, not the American people's interests, not Black America, white America, Native America, none of their interests. The ruling class, the so-called deep state, which is a very ambiguous name for a network of high-ranking individuals throughout the different 3-letter agencies who are kept abreast of the true intention of our ambitions as to why it is we invest in war, why it is we support terrorist organizations, why it is that we are constantly instigating more war with Russia and other superpowers. Why is it that we trade with these nations while simultaneously antagonizing them as the world's enemy? We're the world's enemy. The #1 terrorist organization in the world is the United States and its proxy pit bull, Israel. You can't, if you're going to talk about terrorism in the world being a problem, that's where you got to start. Because that's where the seed money comes from. That's where the armaments come from. That's where the very plan and plot and blueprint for how do we destabilize Syria. What's the guy's name who just got ousted? Al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad. If al-Assad is not playing nicely with Israel and with the United States, which literally is as simple as saying, no, I can't condone what you're doing to the Palestinians in Gaza or the West Bank. That's all it takes. That's all it takes to be the enemy of the United States, and ultimately the job of the media, the establishment media, the stenographers to power. It's their job to manipulate the malleable minds of the American people to think that it's somehow in the best interest of democracy, in the best interest of the freedom that we've grown fat and sick on, our very freedom. I'm not trying to sound like no communist, because I'm not a communist. But what America's freedom has actually become the chains that bind us today. We forged the chains that we wear in life. And the fact that we're so hooked to poison food, so hooked to poison entertainment, so hooked to poison politics, so hooked to poison perspectives and can't see beyond them, is because of the freedom that has been afforded to the industries of the West to manipulate the perception of the masses. So now we think we're thinking for ourselves. We think we're thinking for our own heart's desire, but really we're just parroting like a bunch of mima birds or a bunch of mockingbirds. Ironically enough, Operation Mockingbird was the operation that the CIA had to influence the establishment media news networks and giving the Associated Press the right to report or not report on certain stories and how to report on them to further the interests of the establishment of the West, that they need us believing these things, which is why the boomer generation is so confounded and conflicted as to everything they thought they believed turned out to be a fabrication and or a lie. And now they don't know who to trust. So they're giving way to hopelessness. And now people like the elders in my family are saying, I just can't watch the news anymore. I can't watch the news. I can't this and that and this, which is a good place to start. But we can't afford for the millennials and the Gen Zers and the Gen Outwood, whoever's coming after this, we can't afford for all of them to give up on paying attention to what's going on in the world, not in the era of information. That's why everything is so chaotic right now. That's why everything is so jumbled right now. It's because we've had more information available to us now than we've ever had before. And I'm not saying it's all right and exact. I'm not saying it's all infallible. I'm saying we're being presented with far more information than we ever were back in the day when there was 3 channels presenting news information, micromanaged by the intelligence agencies. It's like now they don't even have to have them Operation Mockingbird. Most of the people who are pundits in the media are literally former intelligence agents. And if they're not them, they're going to invite them on and say, this is former head of the CIA, former head of the NSA, former head of the Homeland Security. You know, they're not even hiding it anymore. It's mask off. And it's important that we're at a mask off time. It's hard on people's heart who are awake, because it gives you a sense of hopelessness, but this is what needs to happen in order for all of this to collapse. And yeah, that's what they're afraid of. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of Africans rising up and doing for self. Ibrahim Traore. Another Garvey. Another Garvey. Another Patrice Lumumba. Another Thomas Sankara. Another Jomo Kenyatta. Another Kwame Nkrumah, Samora Machel. Another great Black African leader who's not sitting there with a powdered white wig on, pretending he's doing massa's bidding, selling out the nation's gold and resources to France, selling out the nation's resources to foreign interests. That's what's happening, whether the West likes it or not, which is why that man is marked for death. But you can't kill. You can, what did Garvey say? He said, you can put the lion in a cage, but there's many cubs in the bush. And that's what's happening, because people, you can't kill a revolution. You can create chaos and disarray, and you can try to confound the revolution. You might slow it down for a year or two or a decade or two, but you can't destroy it. They're in a race to eliminate the majority of human beings on the planet because their greatest fear is a revolution. Once you realize that all people need to live a happy and comfortable life is food, clothing, shelter, education, healthcare, and unfettered access to utilities and resources. And once those human food, clothing, shelter, education, healthcare, unfettered access to utilities and resources. Once you realize that all of those things can be manufactured and controlled by the people without the governments that seek to control them for you, it's a wrap. It's a wrap for them. They're just a bunch of rich people with no one left to protect them and a robot to keep them company in the bunker. And why they got a bunker? Because they know they don't want to be a part of their plan for what the surface of the earth is going to be like if you really start rebelling. What does that mean? We can't rebel? No, we must rebel. There's only one choice. It's rebel or decline. It's rebel or go down as a victim. You got to be a martyr, a warrior, a martyr, or you're going to die a victim. And we need to get back to Charlie Kirk. So this is where I want to go with it, because there's a lot of mixed messaging going on right now on social media. And that was the point I was trying to get to, is now we got all these echo chambers that are forming in the era of information, where people are getting news feeds up to date from independent journalists, citizen journalists, and people just reporting what they're seeing on the street at such a rapid clip. It's not very good for our mental health. I know it's been stifling mine, but at the same time, we have a responsibility to exist in the moment which we are. We're here right now, and we can run to the hills. We can go try to live off the grid. We can hide from the inevitable outcome of the collapse of this society. But what does that really mean? What does that really equate? What does that really generate as far as effective change? Wise and prudent is the man who plants the seed of a tree whose shade they'll never live to see. It's about working today to create a better alternative than what the thinking of yesterday has produced. And ignoring it, like the elders, like I can't even watch the news anymore and everything. Young people, don't allow it to make you sick, but stay abreast of what's going on. And certainly understand that we need to starve the war machine of the finances that keep this mechanism running. And we need to stop working for these agencies and working for anything that is part of the continuity of this system. We have to start doing for self. We have to support those who are doing for self. And that means considering what it is we eat and maybe eating less. That means considering what we watch, what we choose to watch and support, and maybe choose to watch it less. How do we support listening to our music? Is it on Spotify? That's screwing all the artists? Well, then if that's the only route we're going down, then that only leads to one thing. And pretty soon there will be no one passionate enough to be an artist, and we will be ingesting AI music as 98% of what you hear on the radio. So, we have to take accountability for what it is we choose to support. As Greg Carlwood always says from the Higher Side Chats, feed the things you want to grow, starve the things that got to go. We can complain about the government all day, but as long as we keep supporting it, nothing is going to change. You need to starve the beast, starve the dragon, so it has no choice but to listen to you. How do we get chemicals out of the food? We stop buying the food. We stop consuming the food. How do we hold these agencies accountable with the poison that's being put in our drugs and our food and our air, in our water, in the sky, in our tap water? How do we get a hold on that? First, we acknowledge the existence of it. We stop playing this tomfoolery game of arguing with one another whether or not the government is nefarious enough to want to harm you and your family for profit or not. That's a fool's game. You a damn fool if you can't see that. Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder busy talking about what they see while you busy turning a blind eye to what's being done to us. And the poorest people amongst us are the ones suffering the most, because once you create an industry of growing food the right way, producing food the right way, healthy food, healthful food, clean food, the only people who can afford that are the uber rich. And you better believe all those companies, the CEOs of Dow and Monsanto and Syngenta and DuPont, all they eat is organic. They don't touch nothing that anything they produce has ever touched. That's not right. You can't price poor people out of being part of the solution. So that means that system has to go. There's no saving that system. There's no voting your way out of that system. There's no baby steps of change in that system. That system has to go. The military and the police force safeguarding, I hope there's some cops listening, I hope there's some soldiers listening, what your oath commits you to defending is what is putting poison in your baby food. That's what you're defending. So until that changes, the only thing that they have defending, these oligarchs are defending them, is our military and our police force. So the three things that need to happen: stop working your job for the government, stop paying your federal income tax, and military and police, you're at the crossroads. Do you care about the people? Do you care about your children? Do you care about the nation, the security of the future of your children? Or do you care about the scheming, the grevillicious scheming of the Luciferianly rich and shameless? Like, it's really simple, because they're the only ones safeguarding the wicked from the masses. Those who are more than sand on the seashore, more than number, are the masses. And the masses don't have it figured out. As Brother Dawood always said, the masses who are asses. I like to have a little bit more confidence in our ability in 2025 to see through the illusion and the lies. But there's a lot of people supporting a lot of these poor rich industries that are making the poor people poorer and poorer and poorer in judgment, in intellect, in health, all because it's the only thing they can afford to feed their children. Because we're caught up in this matrix of trying to hold on to a job. And I get it. I'm right there with you. I'm in the middle of transitioning into what am I going to do? When plan A fails to work out anymore, what's plan B? What's plan C? Got to do something we don't like in order to survive. I understand. But time is getting desperate. We're not just at the 11th hour. We're at 11 and 58 minutes. We're at 11 and 58 minutes, and the clock is ticking. The doomsday clock is ticking. So it's a perfect time for an assassination. It's a perfect time to take someone that the increasingly radical right, not so much the radical right, because the radical right is a bit more old worldy. It's trying to usher the new right, the new conservative, young, white, it takes all shapes now, but a lot of white, conservative perspective of these young people. They've managed to entice them like the piper's tune. They've been able to entice the rats to them. And now they're like, yeah, I'm not guilty for slavery. I never owned slaves. Yeah, I never beat a black person with the whip. Yeah, why are we so bad? Those type of young whites that have nothing but contempt for the idea of being held accountable, as it says in the book. And I'm not even I don't trust that everyone on here is super religious, but it said the sins of the fathers are going to be held against the heads of the third and the fourth generation. And that's where we're at. Chickens coming home to roost. This is what's happening. You got a lot of these white conservatives that are, always pointing out, look at Paris right now. Look at all the Africans and the Middle Easterners and Arabs and Indians that are ruining Paris, ruining London, ruining Belgium, ruining here. It's like, these are all places that got rich and fat off of brutalizing these people. They robbed all their natural resources, all their gold, all their rubber. laid waste to the land, laid waste to the people. They created generations of impoverished and abused people who are now at a point where they're desperate, hopeless and desperate simultaneously. And, because of neoliberalism, using immigration as a tool or a token to feign multicultural tolerance, without making a better life for these people. We'll just let y'all in here and everything, and just like lighting a firework and then running away. That's the chickens coming home to roost. As you have done, so shall it too be done unto you. As you have so delighted in the shedding of blood, so shall your blood be shed and given to you to drink as water. That's what's happening. And I'm not here cheerleading what happened to Charlie Kirk, because as little as I like Charlie Kirk, as little as I respect what he stood for and what he was about and the influence that he was having over the young white Americans in the world, I'm kind of the anti-Charlie Kirk. I was getting hopeful, even though I didn't think that like the establishment embracing wokeism was genuinely what the solution is. I think it's more of a tool to exacerbate the culture war, to create more intolerance and more frustration and more friction, and make us more prone to violence against one another instead of the ruling class, instead of the oligarchs controlling everything and dismantling the oligarchy and pulling insider trading out of government, instead of pulling corporate PAC funding out of government and super PAC funding out of government, instead of giving the taxpayer the option of prescribing exactly what percentage of their taxes they want going to what causes, like a true democracy, which we don't have an example of in this world. You can't point to America and say, that's a democracy at its best. You can't point to the parliamentary system in the UK, in New Zealand or Australia, or the democratic socialism in Switzerland and say, that's a perfect example of democracy. It's a bit better than what we do here, than the hoodwinking, bamboozled buck dance we're doing in Jumerica. But it's not the example of what needs to be done so that it's actually a government for, of, and by the people, with equal representation of the majority of people paying into existing in that system. None of it is a perfect example of that, but it could be. If people got over their petty individual differences and theological differences and united enough to say, we're not supporting this anymore. We're not going to fund this anymore. We're going to fund the people we see in our community working towards making it a better community. We're going to fund the grocery stores who are carrying the food without all these colors and preservatives and poisons and heavy metals and microplastics. Feed the things you want to grow, starve the things that got to go. That's the only choice we have. Otherwise, things are just going to keep continuing. So me, no fan of Charlie Kirk, but I wasn't rejoicing when I saw what was done to him 2 days ago, because I understood that that is a precedent that we cannot afford. When people aren't listening to media pundits anymore, they're not listening to the media because they know they're all controlled, compromised liars, professional liars. Who they are listening to are the Charlie Kirks, like it or not, the Candace Owenses, the Jordan Petersons, the Max Blumenthals, the Aaron Mates, the Katie Halpers, the Glenn Greenwalds. They're listening to the people who are independent on every side of it, independent of the establishment machine that has been, up until very recently, or even now, able to control the strings like the puppet master's marionette. So people are moving away from that old world trust in establishment media, and they're moving towards independent journalism. And they're moving towards a lot of questionable stuff too, by the way. I'm not going to lie, because that's the conspiracy. We talked about it years ago with Cass Sunstein, who was working as a consultant for Barack Obama. Cass Sunstein, who talked about the conscious infiltration of the conspiracy movement. He said we need to consciously infiltrate the conspiracy theory movement so that everything that's critical of the establishment, critical of the government, can now be lumped in with ridiculousness, like flat earth and whatever. Might be some flat earthers on here. Hey, do what you want to do. Think outside the box. I'm good with you thinking outside the box, but I'm letting you know that there's been, for decades now, a pursuit to consciously infiltrate the conspiracy movement as to muddy the waters, to make legitimate criticism of the establishment perceived as lunacy. It's something that used to be done in Soviet Russia or the Soviet Union, called the pathology of dissent. You're pathologizing dissent. You're making dissent against the government perceived as a disease and a sickness and a mental instability, because only a crazy person would want to say that the government shot JFK or shot Martin Luther King or had anything to do with shooting Malcolm X, when we know that that's the case. We didn't need Trump to come and release a few papers and say, here it is, that's everything, when it ain't. But it's enough. It's enough to know whose sticky fingerprints are all over it. Our own government. And now the conspiracy theory movement, the conspiracy theory industry, which has become an industry. And once anything becomes an industry, it can become a weaponized profiteering mechanism. It doesn't have to hold integrity anymore. It just has to be alluring to the masses. So in the wake of the information age, and in the wake of all of these think tanks and echo chambers and everyone gravitating towards the people they like only and getting their news from one perspective only, we have a renaissance in white American nationalism that's built on a lie, actually. It's actually the America that they're trying to make great again, the great that they think they're getting back to, never really existed for those people. It never really existed in that way for those people. They're what did Tom Petty say? Running down a dream never would come to me, searching for a mystery. So yeah, that's what they're hunting down, some mystery that's never going to manifest fruit. Whether or not a Trump gets in, whether or not a Kamala Harris gets in, whether or not Trump dies, you know, he ain't looking so good. Now that I'm looking at myself, I ain't looking so good. I need to get a little bit more sun, spend a little bit time, less time on the computer, less time in these books, less time inside. So we all got a lot of work to do. But I'll tell you one thing, Trump ain't looking good. Trump ain't looking that good. And if he dies, who's in the wings? J.D. Vance. Who's J.D. Vance, the pupil of? Peter Thiel. Who's Peter Thiel, the partner of? Alex Karp, Palantir. They're all behind AI. They're all behind central digitized currency. They're all behind, some pretty nefarious stuff that we're not going to delve too far into right now to throw myself off track, because we got to get back to Charlie Kirk. But like Trump's ambitions was to win. His only ambition was to win. Now that he's won, he's handed over the reins of power to who? Zionists, technocrats, billionaires, trillionaires. Same old game with an uglier clown face painted on it than the previous clown face. Now we got the sad clown face. Or we had the sad clown face, now we got the manic clown face. But Charlie Kirk was assassinated in cold blood. My assumption was deep state agent provocateur to incite a civil war psyop. And whether or not that's the case, I guarantee you that's the outcome. If people don't wise up to why things like that happen, to the hope and aspiration of killing a Martin Luther King, the hope and aspiration of killing a Malcolm X, killing a John F. Kennedy, what they're hoping it incites in society, killing a Donald Trump. If that wasn't ketchup, I don't know. You know, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I was giving this fool the benefit of the doubt the whole time because the left was being so disingenuous with their misrepresentation of who and what he was and who and what his pursuits were in being a president and how he became president the first time. All the Russiagate nonsense, which was a hoax. That's the thing. The left can't get upset that they lost against him again because every method you used was disingenuous and dishonest and made you seem as though you were a liar who was sensationalizing things to create enough animosity to incite a race war. And when you're proven to be unreliable in your accusations of this man is guilty of so much. All you had to do was focus on his character and what he does stand on and what he has been convicted for. He's convicted of raping his own wife, Ivanka Trump. He's a sex offender. He became a sex offender, a convicted sex offender when he was to someone he was married to. So all you had to do, you had this whole litany, and they're like, well, if he wasn't in the Epstein files, how come they didn't use it on him? Because the Epstein files implicate far too many of them. Not just the politicians, but scientists and medical professionals and oligarchs and royalty from Saudi Arabia and the UK and on in Israel. There's too much of a liability for that to come out against them. So that's a backfire. They knew it would have been a backfire. Like, yeah, we can get Trump with it, but then we're blowing the cover off of everything that we've been endorsing and indulging in as well. So this is what I'm worried about the Charlie Kirk shooting. I know there's a lot of people who are rejoicing over the murder of Charlie Kirk. I don't rejoice over cold-blooded murder of people, particularly political activists and everything. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe that you should have the right to express your opinions, even if they're wrong. You should have the right to express your opinions, even if it's hate speech. I think there's a lot of righteous righteous indignity that can be given breadth of room to understand without you having to agree with it. You don't have to. The moment you start advocating for, I believe in freedom of speech as long as it's stuff that I believe in and not stuff that I don't like, then you don't believe in freedom of speech. That's hypocrisy. That's literally hypocrisy. You believe in hypocrisy. You believe rules for me, but not for thee, or rules for thee, but not for me. You know, the only way you can safeguard your questionable or unpopular rhetoric about things that are happening and or not happening and freedom to express them in the world is if you suffer through hearing it from the other side. You have to be the defender of the rights of those to express themselves without resorting to violence to silence that rhetoric. And I'm not mourning the loss of a Charlie Kirk. I find him despicable, distasteful, and a huge part of the problem that we're in the wake of right now. But I see as him being assassinated in cold blood in front of a crowd of people in mid-sentence, like that, the blowback from that for the United States is going to be severe and it's going to be serious. And if it's not going to instigate an actual civil war between the the friction of the citizenry of the United States. It's going to be used, it damn sure is going to be used by the establishment that's in power right now to engage in more martial law, to lock us down, to start Patriot Act 3.0, start stripping down our freedoms, which they've already been doing. There was no freedom of speech candidacy. You wanted to be able to talk the nonsense you talk. Now you stripping away students' rights to protest a terrorist regime in the Middle East, creating more havoc in the Middle East than any of these single nations or any of those nations put together in the Middle East. I'm talking about Israel. You know, so you already see them doing this. You already see them moving in this direction. You already see them trying to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, even though it's completely different things. And the harshest critics of Zionism that I've ever listened to, the majority of them are Jewish. Some of them are Orthodox Jewish. Some of them are secular. Some of them are atheists. But they all identify with the ethnicity, so-called ethnicity or identity of Judaism. And that's a whole nother conversation that I plan on having with Baba in the future once we have time to do like a 6-hour, 8-hour presentation maybe, talk about the difference, what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be a Hebrew, what it means to be an Israelite, and the difference. But that's not for right now. What's for right now is acknowledging that what was just done was what I perceive to be a deep state action in order to entice a civil war. But it seems as though if this kid, Tyler Robinson, 22-year-old in Utah, is actually the culprit, and he was moving under his own influence, if he was doing it because, they're saying, hey, fascist, catch was written on a bullet, and, some songs that Italians sang, against fascism in, around World War II and all sorts of stuff. So it's at least the picture they're painting, which I'm not saying you can trust anything you see at face value. I mean, there might be a lot of stuff that come out about this guy. Seemed like he was a plant, I'm surprised he wasn't wearing a purple wig. I'm surprised he didn't have like My Little Ponies like hanging off his gun and all this, because to me, it seemed as though what they were trying to make it seem was though this was just another trans shooting, which there have been a number of mass shooters in schools that identify as trans. Now, whether those are psyops or not, I haven't seen enough convincing evidence to say yay or nay in either way. I just know that this country is a mess. And Charlie Kirk, one, he was a fervent supporter of the Second Amendment, saying, he knew that having freedom of guns and an armed citizenry was going to be parallel with the cost of human life and cost of even innocent life in the nation. And that was a risk that was just going to have to be taken in order to preserve the Second Amendment and private citizenry's in the United States of America's right to arm itself and defend itself. That's just a cost that was going to get paid. He didn't realize he was going to pay the costs really quickly after saying that. So he's sort of a consequence of his own virtue, so to speak, if that's what you want to call it, his own principles. He's now a sacrifice for his own principles, according to his own words, and the outcome of his own destiny. But so maybe it was just a radical leftist that was sick of this guy running off at the mouth and enticing young people to thinking that, white people have nothing to account for their litany and legacy of crimes against humanity across the globe for hundreds of years, even thousands of years. And at least as a measuring stick to use against the future. Like, this is what was done in the past. It yielded these terrible results for so many people. Let's course correct, adjust that, and change it to something better for going forward. Instead of utilizing their lessons in history in order to do that with it, they're looking at it and they're saying, I don't want to take accountability for anything that was happening in the past. All sorts of cultures owned slaves. The Moors owned slaves. Everyone owned slaves. Rah, 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 rah. So nothing was special about our slavery, which isn't true. You know, there's a difference between indentured servitude, bonded slavery, and chattel slavery, which was developed with the sub-Saharan slave trade when the Arabs just dehumanized those who they took in slavery to the point of they treated them worse than any camel, worse than any donkey, worse than any animal that would be in their charge. They treated the human beings worse. So chattel slavery was developed with the sub-Saharan slave trade and was taken to whole new levels with the transatlantic slave trade, where they were actually taken across the sea to a new land and leading into slave breeding programs and slave breeding plantations where people were literally bred like animals in order to be abused and be the burden bearers of the civilization in which they were third-class citizens, 3/5 of a human being, and all of this stuff. So no, it's not the same as what the Moors did. It's not the same as the slavery that existed in Africa previously. It's not the same as even a lot of the slavery that existed in Europe in the aftermath of the Moors and all that, before the sub-Saharan slave trade created a whole new bellicose, decadent, reprobate type of form of slavery called chattel slavery. So yeah, that's something that can be corrected in whatever comic book they call a history book that they're trying to read right now, or emphasized on, I think, personally. But Lord knows Charlie Kirk wasn't focused on that. He was trying to absolve himself and all white people of any sin white people have ever created, yesterday, today, and moving into tomorrow. And apparently that wasn't, apparently either he wasn't a valuable enough asset for the deep state to not murder and paint into a martyr in order to antagonize a civil war, which is what I thought it was, and still kind of think it is. And whether or not that's the case, I still think that's the outcome that's coming from it. So I would say be cautious and be careful when celebrating the murder. I believe someone just posted a comment on there. I couldn't read it because the screen's too small, so I couldn't read it. But big up, be cautious when celebrating the murder of your enemies, because you may be the next on the chopping block. You may be the next on Le Guillotine, and I think time is more important than ever. Yeah, one thing I can give Charlie Kirk credit for is he was a devout supporter of freedom of speech. He wanted to de-escalate tension, even though, he was exacerbating friction between racial classes and ethnic classes and financial classes within the United States of America through what he was doing. I think he genuinely believed in defending freedom of speech because he knew it could be turned on him. That's the thing. Once you start advocating for censoring people, that's the same tool that's going to censor you. And you need to have enough foresight and not be short-sighted to the point to where you're like, I just want this person to shut up because I don't want people to listen to them. I don't believe in what they're saying. I don't think they should be heard. So instead of protesting them yourself or debunking them or debating them or protesting them, you silence them violently. And that's a precedent that we as a nation cannot afford to normalize and be comfortable with. And I damn sure am not comfortable with it because I know it's just going to lead to more of the same. I know it's going to start becoming a more normalized result. I don't like this person, I'm going to shoot him. And I'm someone who says a lot of things on my radio show, on Baba TV, on social media that people don't like. And that's fine. And I've had people who were at the same radio station as me try to condemn me, try to get me canceled, try to report me to the FCC, try to get me banned off of social media in the same organization as me. And I never once used my voice to try to take their programs away. And that was my defense against them, was like, look, I don't agree with none of the nonsense, the BS in a birdcage that you put on your show, all the propaganda, all the CIA scripted propaganda that you're promoting on your show just to confuse people. I don't agree with none of that. But I have never once tried to get your show taken off the air. That's something I haven't done because I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in people's right to hang themselves with what it is they say on the air, on the record. A lot of times, that's their biggest undoing. That's one of the best things about Trump. He's so, half the time he's so off script that he just says things that any of his handlers are scrambling in the back, sweating bullets, scared to death that he's shooting from the hip because he thinks he's smart. And he's a dummy, but he thinks he's smart. So he says something that he thinks someone will find appealing, and maybe a few people will. But you tend to get the truth, just like the Department of War. You tend to get the truth from him accidentally more time than you would from a polished actor like a Barack Obama, a polished actor like Bill Clinton. Notice I didn't say Biden. Maybe Biden in his prime, even though in his prime he was still getting out for lying all the time, But like he's not polished. He's a pretty what you see is what you get type of politician and businessman. And I think he's a poorer businessman than he is a politician. He's shaping up to be a real good politician because he doesn't have to be saying anything truthful. He can just bold-faced lie to you and then slip up and tell the truth once in a while and just become the most distasteful person who's ever been in American politics. And in doing so is the most genuine thing we've ever had. He's the most genuine president we've ever had. So, honestly. So yeah, Charlie Kirk, he got shot. Mourn him, don't mourn him or despise his memory, work against his ambitions with the life, light, strength, heat, energy that you still have as a living being on this planet is what I would advocate for. Using your mouth, using your words, using your actions in not silencing other people, but proving how ill-fated their perspective and their ambitions are. Like the ambition of withholding welfare from your own citizenry, not paying for schools, or the public schools we have need a lot of work. We all know this. The public schools we have need a lot of work. That's why people with money send their kid to private schools, because they think they're getting a better education. And sometimes they're just getting a more selective form of education, But universities should be free. In a world, in a country you want to see prosper, in the way China is prospering, in the way China's economy is prospering, the way China's technology is prospering, we've lost that race. It's not even a race anymore. We're in the dust. They already have machines doing all the work. The majority of their people already own homes given to them by the government. There's barely any homeless people in China. They're not telling you that. I'm not saying I want to live in a communist Chinese society, as though we don't already do it. We don't even know it. We're just a product. We're just a brand owned by China at this point. They just haven't changed the flag over yet. Considering they already own our most lucrative industries, sports, entertainment, increasingly the real estate sector, increasingly the agricultural sector. All the agriculture that was owned by America is going out of business because of the tariffs you've imposed, Trump. You've imposed these tariffs that you're gloating about how much money you're making, you know where that money's coming from? The American consumer. The American consumer is paying more for the same goods because the brokers and the corporate industrialists aren't going to float the cost of the tariffs. All they do is mark up the cost of the products, and the American consumer is paying the cost. And now that you've scared the hell out of the actual working class of the United States of America, which is the migrant class of Mexico and South America, you've scared the hell out of them, black bagging them and pulling them out of courtrooms and schools and off the street and out from behind the tamale cart and send them to Alligator Alcatraz and Guantanamo. Now that you've threatened them with expelling them to nations that they didn't even come from, you're expelling them to African nations and CCOT and El Salvador and other nations that they never even were from. You've diminished the workforce in the food producing sector of the United States of America by more than 80%. And now you have all the big farms, which, we can have debates about the ethics and of the methods used at the big agricultural farms. But the reality is the majority of our food that's produced in America is produced on farms that use primarily migrant labor. And that's all that they can afford because Americans won't do that backbreaking labor. They're not going to pick strawberries for $12 an hour. They're not going to pick food. They're not going to grow wheat and harvest wheat that's covered in glyphosate and chlormequat and atrazine and destroy their glandular system and give them cancer all over. They're not going to do that for $11 an hour. So all of these bleeding heart alligator tear white Americans complaining about everyone's taking their jobs that they never wanted to do in the first place, and it pulled every string of their privilege to try to be able to get disability and unemployment and I'm not criticizing anyone who's on unemployment. I'm actually, as unpopular as it is in certain circles, I think that a universal basic income is inevitable. Whether you agree that taxpayer money should go to it or not, universal basic income is inevitable. Every single American should be getting a certain amount of money every month to survive. And no, I don't think it would depreciate the Americans' will to go out there and work and build projects with the money they're making to build the businesses they want and the pursuits they want and go to the schools they want and learn the trades that they want so that they can become a more progressive member of the society. But if you starve a population, you disadvantage a population, you make being housed in America not an option for the majority of people. You flood the whole society with drugs, illegal and legal. Legal drugs that get you hooked and have to resort to the illegal drugs, which they're bringing into. And then you're going to blame Maduro. You're going to blame Venezuela. Oh, they're bringing in all the fentanyl. The only ones that are bringing in the fentanyl are the ones CIA working with, man. Hand in glove. They don't care about Americans. White American, they don't care nothing about the opiate epidemic on you. The only thing they care about is they got caught. The only thing they care about the drug epidemic is that it's been made clear, whether it be cocaine from Colombia, crack cocaine epidemic in the 80s, heroin, into the whole oxycodone and hydrocodone and all the painkiller epidemic. I lived in the South. I lived in Mississippi right after I graduated in 2000, and it was the first time I came from DC. And people did drugs, but I'd never seen people abusing prescription medicine in consuming it with alcohol and abusing alcohol and prescription medicine in the way that I saw when I moved to Mississippi.
What?
When I saw how it was like just commonplace, and people were like snorting Valium and snorting Percocet and doing oxys and taking hydrocodone and drinking and then driving around with a car full of their. I could, a lot of those friends that I have, they're gone. They're gone. You know, so these are homegrown problems that were covertly invested in by greedy corporatists. With the Adler family, was it one of the main profiteers of the oxycodone, the Adlers, getting away with paying next to nothing compared to what they made off of eliminating generations of young hopefuls. And we wonder why young Americans don't have the ambition to go get a job. You need to go get a job, Grouch. For what? I remember Sarah Silverman said something. She's a comedian. She's a white Jewish comedian who I disagree with on a lot of political things, but sometimes she tell a funny joke. And she was talking about Good Times. Was it Good Times, right? She was talking about Good Times, the television show in the 70s. She said, the reason I love that show is it gave you the knowledge, it gave you the insight that if you worked real hard, if you picked yourself up by your bootstraps, and you worked really hard and put your nose to the grindstone and your shoulder to the wheel and just gave it all you got, that you too could live in abject poverty for the rest of your life. And that is what the American dream, so-called, is turning out to be an American nightmare for all Americans. And the only weapon they have to distract you from changing it is by convincing you that it's the people poorer than you, next to you, that are the ones making your life hard. These immigrants over here. It's these black people over here. It's this welfare mom over here. It's these people who have been marginalized for generations since the beginning of this so-called great American nation. So-called. I prefer what Benjamin Franklin called it, the United Snakes of America. That's what he used to write in his newsletter. That's what he used to call it. And I think that their number one tool to keep the wealth for themselves and continuity of control is to keep the majority of Americans, who still at this point are white Americans. White Americans are the majority race in America. As long as you can convince them that it's the poor people is the reason why you can't afford to fill the fridge. It's because of poor people that you can't afford to keep the lights on. It's because of poor people that you can't afford to buy a new house. It's because of poor people that you can't do things. While all the while, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, Larry Fink, Peter Thiel, and all the rest of these monsters are getting rich off your distraction. So I'm not saying, because there might be a few good whites out there, and there are, I know a few. I know a few whose ambition isn't for them themselves. Wise and prudent is the man who plants a seed for a tree for the shade they'll never live to see. The people who put work towards benefiting others' circumstances. That's what being supernatural is to all the Bible readers out there. When we hear the term supernatural and we have this understanding, Christ was supernatural. He turned water into wine. He walked on the water. No, being supernatural is coming out of the natural world, being a natural being, an animal, a mammal that's coded with the O's of Ake and Beka to adhere and revere to the current of existence coming from the blackness of the universe. The natural world is harsh. The natural world is brutal. Dog eat dog. Survival of the fittest. You got to sleep in the rain. You got to get scorched by the heat. You got to do your best to stay alive. You don't get the comforts of a home. You don't get the creature comforts of the human condition. Watch National Geographic. You want to see what nature is? Everyone thinks that nature is beautiful. It is. It's beautiful. But it ain't no utopia. It's harsh. And then we develop these things that separate us from the animals. We insulate ourselves from nature. And through insulating ourselves from nature, we become this different kind of animal that nurtures the mind and nurtures our innovation and our pursuits to make things easier for us, to make agriculture easier for us, to make hard labor easier for us, to make life longer, to make health healthier. So like that's shifting from being a natural being now to become a supernatural being. You use that human innovation, the ability to develop a world that safeguards you from the threats of nature and threats of a natural world, and saying, instead of resorting back to the natural state of, I want to do all these things to make my life better for me, screw everyone else, me, self-serving, self-centered. I can turn a blind eye to suffering in the world, but me, I have to preserve comfort for me. Coming out of that mind state, using prudence and seeing that that is a short-sighted endeavor, and the only way that you can really do right by yourself is by doing right by others, making it better for others, helping others understand the mistakes you made. Don't lie about you never made a mistake. Don't lie and gloat and bravado and talk about how right you are and good you are and how you did this and you did that, boast and boast and bravado and all that. No. You take the youth. You educate them on what you did wrong and help safeguard them from making the same mistakes you did so that they can get further along than you did in your time. When you start helping others in a way that maybe you wish you were helped, but wishes are for fishes, because, we can do that. We can educate others. We can house others. We can feed others. We can give them the opportunities that shouldn't be clutched like our pearls when our ancestors are criticized for doing this or that. Which, if you have any knowledge of any history at all, you know that there's an abundance of stuff that can be criticized in every kingdom, in every ethnicity, and certainly this one. So what makes a person evolve from being natural to supernatural is embracing the teachings of the Christ, or the Christ consciousness, in the center of your heart. When you see a starving child and you get that lump in your throat and your neck hair starts to stand up and you feel a welling of empathy, it's called your vagus nerve. And that, unless you're a sociopath, tends to inspire the human being to move from being a natural animal to becoming a supernatural being. Say, I'm going to use my time on this planet to do for others, to help others, to get further than I got, to make things a better place. We're not going to get a utopia, but we can get a lot closer than we are now. This whole separate and unequal eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, fight for a limb, life for a life type of thing, that's animal kingdom. That's Animal Planet. Whether or not you're doing it with sticks and stones or space age weaponry, that's Animal Planet. That's carnal thinking. That's devil. Us as human beings, what separates us from the natural world is our ability to evolve in a place where we seek to cherish community and cherish family and share with one another. Could you imagine what the world would look like if Africans didn't embrace everyone else who they eventually came into contact with the innovations and developments of the civilizations that they nurtured into existence? If they were so greedy as other kingdoms to come later with innovation. There wouldn't have been a European Renaissance. There wouldn't have been an Italian Renaissance. There wouldn't have been a Greece or Rome or baby London, England, or America. There wouldn't have been none of that. But it comes at the point in which human beings invest in nurturing others to bring them up, not to hold them down while they eat more than their fair share. And it might mean sacrifice. It most likely means compromise. It might mean pacing yourself and allowing roughshod to happen only for it to fail in order to nurture a better way of doing things into existence. Patience is a virtue that ties into being supernatural. That's why when we spoke about the branching between techno-sapien transhumanist, which is what they're trying to turn us into, which is a programmable robot. So we, absent of free will, absent of the opportunity to become a devil or a god, become a demon or an angel, against the natural evolution of Homo sapiens, which I believe we're at the crossroads of. The natural the natural evolution of Homo sapiens sapien is Homo sapien prudentia, or the wise and prudent man, the one that sees down the road the consequences of the outcome of one's actions and course correcting and navigating to prevent the negative aspects and investing in the positive outcome. And weighing our technological evolution against prudence. Just because we can do it, does that mean we should do it? Asking those questions. And the people trying to turn us into techno-sapien transhumanists don't want us to ask those questions. They don't want Jiminy Cricket up here chirping about, wait, do you really think that's a good idea? What if this happens? It could have this consequence. It could do this. And then as we evaluate the consequences of our actions and weighing in the balance the negative aspects of it, we course correct. To err is human. To forgive is divine. And we have to start with forgiving ourselves for the mistakes we make and forgiving one another for when we get it wrong. And even if someone doesn't know they've been wrong and are willing to own being wrong, we as spiritually supernatural beings need to find a way to forgive those who can't even acknowledge their fault and work towards preventing the problems that they are engineering into existence. We have to oppose it, but we can't become that which we hate. Becoming what we hate in the other as retaliation to the other. That's a one-way road. And that's a road with no room for growth. And I'm not saying you got to forgive every single action in every single instance. It's hard to do. It's hard to do, which is why it's part of the exercise of becoming a supernatural entity. And I'm not telling you to forgive Charlie Kirk. I don't forgive him for the works he's done and for what he's done. I can be impressed with someone who I don't agree with. I'm impressed with the amount of energy he's put into his organizations and into his movement and the groundswell that he's gotten into his movement. He's a workhorse. He puts the work in. But there's one thing that Charlie Kirk believes in that I believe, which is freedom of speech. You got to be able to allow people who you don't agree with to speak and to express themselves, even if it's just in the spirit of debate. Then align with the nefarious entity that doesn't want you to have any free will to silence you. which is why the whole Israel thing was such a mask-off event for so many, because you had all these alt-right MAGA types rah-rahing about freedom of speech and rah-rahing about they're getting censored on Twitter and they're getting censored on Facebook, which they were. Disproportionately censored on Twitter and social media when it was the Biden administration. And that another reason why you lost so much trust, why the neo-lib, not genuinely left, because they're neocons too, but they're neoliberals, they call themselves. You trying to restrict others from freedom of speech and freedom of expression makes you the enemy of the truth and the enemy of freedom. Charlie Kirk knew it. And maybe him knowing that and that being the one fly in the ointment for Israel, one fly in the ointment for the Trump administration, one fly in the ointment for the CIA, him advocating for the Epstein files to be released, which Congress was actively in the process of voting on when he was shot. And it threw everything in disarray, and the Republicans voted it down, which they did before, but the pressure is there. Sorry, Trump, the Epstein files, the call out for that is they ain't going anywhere. You're going to have to make a mocked up fake version and release it, because Lord knows you ain't going to tell the truth about what you did, what you do. So you have to mock up a fake form and release it just to give just to give them some meat, just to give the wolf pack some meat to chew on. Because they ain't going to forget all the promises you made that you've about faced on in the most laborious way. I was criticizing the left for calling you a Nazi and calling you a fascist and sensationalizing every claim against you to try to demean you into something no moral person could prefer compared to the establishment left. I thought that was a disingenuous method to pursue, and all it did was give you a lack of credibility on the left from your own constituency. People who are genuinely left and more liberal leaning found a hard time aligning with you when everything you were promoting turned out to be a lie. You were just as corrupt with all the Ukraine stuff and Burisma stuff and your son and all this nonsense and the whole aftermath of Fauci with the warp speed thing, which that was set out by Trump, but then Biden followed it up and tried to mandate all sorts of stuff, which the Supreme Court overturned. All of that led to the erosion of faith in the political party of the left, which is good. Because you can't trust none of them. None of these parties, none of these establishment-controlled parties can be trusted. There is no, I remember Elijah Muhammad used to tell Farrakhan, he was like, have you ever seen a person in which there is no good at all? And Farrakhan said, no, mighty apostle. And he pointed out the car at some old white guy across the street. He said, there you go. Now, I would hope people could see that same perception or that same meta perception of that circumstance with the political leadership that maybe most people don't even think are a solution, but they think it's the only choice they have. They have either this or this. It's either Coke or Pepsi. You don't get to drink water. It's either Coke or Pepsi. There's not going to be a good politician. If there's a good politician trying to rise the ranks in the Democratic Party, they're going to be compromised, thuswise corrupted, killed, or incriminated. They're going to be compromised in one way or the other. And same with the right. And I think I'm starting to go around and around and around again. So I'm gonna cool it out and open it up to you, Baba. But I really think that, the longer we have faith in the establishment politics and the establishment media to give us anything that's genuine in the truth and good for the people. And I'll just say Americans, because whether we like one another or not, we're all Americans. Whether we agree with one another's perception of history or not, we're all Americans. Whether we feel it's been an equal playing field or we know it's not been, we're still all Americans here. And the circumstances of what happens in the hallowed halls of Congress and in the Senate and in the White House, it's going to all trickle down to us. And we're the ones who are going to have to carry the burden. We're the ones who are going to have to live in the burden. And if you think for a second that there's anyone in any genuine position of power who cares about preventing a civil war, who cares about like quelling the energy down from a fever pitch to violence against one another, then you're sadly mistaken. That is the agenda. That is the pursuit. And they will use radical groups and they will use establishment groups. They will use the media and they will co-opt independent media and influencers like Charlie Kirk. They will use these people as useful idiots, even if they're brilliant, especially if they're brilliant. Because if they're brilliant, then they catch the ear of others and then they can, and everyone is fallible and can be compromised. To err is natural. So, that's what's going on. And until we get to the point to where we can start valuing less of the vanity, less of the, as Vaughn used to say, lights, camera, action. And I really care for no lights, camera, action thing. We were talking about earlier about how when Vaughn was nominated for a Grammy through his album that was released through a VP, I believe it was Treasure, and an album that was actually distributed through VP. So he was actually nominated for a Grammy. He didn't even respond to it. He didn't even respond to the nomination. Wasn't interested. Like Rima say, I don't want nothing from Babylon. You don't want no accreditation from the beast. You don't want no accreditation from those who seek to micromanage and control the music industry and keep people blissfully distracted from reality roots and message music that can actually have an influence to change society. They want you distracted from that. So he said, I'm not going to let them accredit anything, any of my works. So Charlie Kirk, I mean, there's probably a lot that has come out probably since we started talking, about who this kid is, Tyler Robinson. I was more interested in that plane. What was the plane? Private jet with the tail number N88KG LLC departed from the Provo airport an hour after the shooting. So there was a private jet that left from the Provo airport an hour after the shooting and turned off its transponder, turned off its tracker. I want to know more about that. Who is that? Who was on that jet? Maybe it's completely disconnected. That's definitely what they want us to think. But why such an unorthodox mode of operations? It's obviously not allowed with aircraft in that way. Unorthodox, to say the least. Maybe it was just a young kid who wanted to be a hero and thought that killing Charlie Kirk was something that needed to be done, and he took it upon himself to do it. It was obviously a professional hit. The fact that he got away and the fact that he, from such a crowded place doing that, secured place doing that, got such a clear shot from so far away. It seemed like a professional hit. And whether or not it was a deep state agent or it was just a kid on a mission, I think the outcome is the same. I think, Civil War PSYOP is what's on every page of the menu for 2026, 2027. And by 2030, their plan is for most of us to actually be dead or dying, working 0 jobs, contributing nothing to society, collecting an allowance of digital centralized currency on our way to the grave, on our way into insanity. Like that's the plan for us. Like the people whose goals are manipulating the future, they hate human beings. They don't want you as a supernatural being. They don't even want you as a human being. They want you as techno simulacrum transhumanist. Their value for us is as a petri dish for their inventions. As long as they can use us to manipulate us into the prototypes of the cyborgs that they would like to create so that they can say they invented an intelligent, sentient being, a better one than God created. They did better than God. They're smarter than God. That's what their ambition is. And the only way we can overcome them is by deleting our investment in them. And it's a lot of work. That's an easy thing to say. It's a lot of work. That's this computer, man. That's StreamYard. That's YouTube. That's this digital platforms that we've grown addicted to. That's these supercomputers that are in our pockets. That might be going without a lot of that and reverting back to being just a human being again. Reading books, having conversations with other human beings, building our intellect organically as human beings with one another, withdrawing from these echo chambers that just exacerbate our hate and contempt for one another. Because that's what we gravitate to. That's what we're attracted to. That's what I'm attracted to. I don't want to sit there. I mean, I go out of my way to listen to people who I don't agree with to try to crack the code on what's being spelled out for the spellbound within society. I need to understand what's being said so that I can debunk it with factual information that's not being said. So I understand the importance and relevance of coming outside of your own echo chamber and comfort zone, but it's a lonely place to be, and I can see how it creates a sense of hopelessness where you feel like, am I the only person that sees this? And then when you go into a place where everyone thinks a lot like the way you think, you're like, oh, here I am. You know, this is the promised land. This is where everyone thinks like me. I'm more comfortable here. This is less prickly. I feel less judged. I feel embraced. I feel loved. I want to be in that. So even if you're just participating in it peripherally as an observer and not really even super engaged in social media, you get to a point where you're just surrounding yourself and insulating yourself with the views you already hold. And then when you come into contact with a view opposite to yours, you lash out, more extreme. I remember there was a study being done about road rage, and it was talking about how people are far more prone to violence when they're behind the wheel of their car, by themselves in their car, than they ever would be in a conversation with a human being on the street. And when it snaps, that's when they get out of their car and go kill somebody on the road or whatever. It's because it's like a security blanket. Like, we're in a safe place. I'm safe to be in here with my anger and my frustration. That's why we yell out curses at the traffic and everything, which if we were just walking on a sidewalk with a bunch of crowded people, we wouldn't be screaming at them in their ear to get out of our way. So that's like the echo chamber effect. We're in this car that's a safety bubble of our own thoughts. And then when we get exposed to it, not only do we get exposed to it and have nothing but contempt and violent contempt for it at times, but we assume that anyone who we know, family or friend or people we grew up with or people we know on our job, anyone who reminds us of that at all has to be 100% like that and our enemy. And on that, I'll say one last thing. It's not left versus right. It's not trans versus straight. It's not blue versus red. It's a minute minority of incredibly wealthy versus everyone else. And police and soldiers, you need to decide who it is you support. Do you support humanity, or do you support the aristocracy? Are you servants of the king, or are you protectors of the peasants? And that mind, big up Due Dissidence, something good to listen to. Due Dissidence, Keaton Weiss, Russell Dobular, I don't know if he created, but he coined the phrase the peasant mind. The peasant mind. And what they need us in is in this peasant mind state to adore the ruling class. We need to somehow have respect and reverence for the ruling class and be at variance with the other peasants. And that's their goal for us. And as long as we reside there, as long as we don't rise above it and rise above our own ethnic differences and religious differences and socioeconomic differences and care for no one but ourselves and don't embrace individuality, but steep into individualism, as Baba taught me a long time ago, I think when I first met you, actually, Baba, one of the first reasonings we had was the difference between individuality and individualism. And I hold it to this very day. Individuality is the unique differences within each other that we can combine like Voltron and make our communities stronger and work better together, synergistically, to accomplish more than any of the other parts isolated on their own. Individualism is, I don't care about no one else. I got mine. You got to go get yours. I don't owe you nothing. And that's the trend. That's the trend that has really taken hold. And that's a trend that promises nothing but destruction for this nation, promises nothing but destruction for the world. So that being the case, I hope we can work on figuring out some solutions. I hope that we can work on some cool, calm, and collective, constructive solutions. As Baum Benjamin says, seek knowledge before vengeance. And I certainly think we need to seek knowledge on who this person was that actually assassinated Charlie Kirk, why they did it. And and a lot of different things could make sense. Could be a radical kid who hated him, because we're at that point now. It could have been he's becoming a liability for the deep state because in the last few months he's been getting more vocally critical of Israel, which he never was. He was a fervent supporter of Israel. He was not a supporter of the Palestinian people at all, but he's been a little bit more vocal about the inequities he's seen in Israel when he was there and criticizing that dynamic as being part of the problem, as well as criticizing America. Once again, criticizing America's welfare support of the state of Israel, when all Israel seems to be doing is running around the Middle East and world covertly, creating problems and dragging America as the defender of, with armaments, with our army, and with our influence, pulling America into these regional issues that I personally think not only should we not be supporting, but we should be standing against if we believe in the Constitution and we believe in the Bill of Rights and we believe in defending people's freedom and we believe in equality, justice, and order, and we believe in international rules-based order and international morality and all that stuff. If we genuinely believe in it, then we should be the most vocal opponent of Israel's conduct in Palestine and throughout the region of the Middle East. And and us not being that, us being fervently opposite, us being the most devout, the most loyal lapdog to the Zionist regime in Israel and the Zionist neo-colonial project, and being the most fervent supporter and endorser and investor, accomplice in that. We should be the complete opposite. If we held good to the Constitution, and we held good to the, not just the Constitution, if we held good to the Constitution, if we held good to the Torah, if we held good to the Bible, if we held good to the Bill of Rights, if we held good to the secular humanitarian virtues that we as a majority secular nation actually subscribe to, all of those different perspectives of people would be fervently against what's going on at the hands of Israel in the Middle East. And apparently Charlie Kirk was criticizing them more and more and more as of late. And that doesn't go well. That doesn't go well. And he was also advocating for the Epstein files to be released, which a lot of powerful people really don't want people to be fixating on that.
What?
And but other than that, I don't see him as a drastic nemesis of Israel. I don't see him as a drastic nemesis of the deep state. I think he's done more to get young white sort of intellectually stagnant population, young white people, on board with continuity of the establishment, continuity of the corporatist warmongering system as it is, not with drastic changes, not with a baptism of morality, not with changing America into a nation that actually lifts up its citizenry to become a great nation, to become a strong nation, to actually give people a sense of genuine organic patriotism and American nationalism that's built on my beliefs in America are founded because America is doing this. The merit of any nation is measured by how well that nation takes care of its most underprivileged. I'm going to say it again. The merit of any nation is measured by exactly how well it takes care of their most disadvantaged, of their most marginalized, of their most underserved. That's what measures the merit of a nation. Not how many millionaires there are, not how many single people own 30 homes, not how many cars you got, not how many gold records you made. It's measured by how well and empathically you take care of the disadvantaged, the lowest classes of that nation. That's what defines the integrity of a nation. With that being said, Baba, I guess I'll hand it to you. Hand it to you for a moment. And thank you for letting me come on here and go on and on in my long-winded, roundabout type of way. I know I take far too long to hit any single point, if I even hit any of them. And you're like the only platform I know that actually gives me that space and breath to do it. And I want to thank you for that, and thank the Baba TV universe for allowing me that time.
Beautiful, beautiful. Woo. Yes. Can you hear me? Am I coming in clear? I haven't worked this thing in a while. I don't know. Family,
yeah,
I appreciate you tuning in to my brother, the BAMBU King. We go all the way back. He's like my little brother that I've known ever since he was a little teenager. And speaking of that, shout out to Ross Michael Leslie. Give him a shout out. His Earth Day was yesterday. I didn't forget about you. I see you posted. He's doing some great works out there. I see him walking right in your shoes. He's like a little Ross A.D. You know, I can see him growing just right. A lot of your ways and, vernacular and so forth. And you've taught him well. And I just hope and pray that he stays steadfast and doesn't fall off, into the mayonnaise, so to speak, as so many do.
No chance. no
many.
chance with that one. He's
So many do. Now, on another note, I want to just say that talk about your radio show a little bit. Let the people know that you Taste the Consciousness Wednesday from 6 to 8, where they can find it. You see it scrolling across, but he can be a little bit more definitive about that. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Taste the Consciousness is my roots and culture reggae program that we've been doing for 16 years now. And it exists on KSKQ Community Radio in Ashland, Oregon, which is 89.5 FM in Ashland, 94.1 FM in Medford, Oregon on a satellite station. The best way to hear it, though, I mean, you can go to the kskq.org webpage and stream it live. Some people have issues depending on your operating system on your phone. Some people, I found that the best places to really get it universally is a site called onlineradiobox.com. There's radiogarden.com is another one where you can go to these sort of online streaming radio hubs where every radio station in the world who has a internet stream kind of puts their stuff on there. So you can listen to any station in the world at any time you want, as long as their stream is active. So onlineradiobox.com, just type in keyword KSKQ, and you can listen to it live. My show is on Wednesdays from 3 to 5 Pacific Standard Time on the West Coast. 3 to 5, it's 6 to 8 on the East Coast. Everyone else is going to have to do the math on that. But on the East Coast, it's 6 to 8 p.m. every Wednesday. Or on the West Coast, it's 3 to 5 p.m. every Wednesday. And unless something's happened, like I was sick on Wednesday, so I couldn't go in because I respect the other programmers and I try not to spread my germs. So I stayed home. And the week before, I had to put one of my dogs down on that day. So that was sad. So I had to kind of prioritize that. But normally, if I'm in town, which is usually every Wednesday, 3 to 5 Pacific Standard Time, 6 to 8 Eastern Standard Time, Taste of Consciousness, conscious roots and culture reggae music of the modern day, for the most part on the modern day. Sometimes we have old roots shows, sometimes we have world reggae shows, but for the most part it's conscious, rock hard roots and culture reggae from Jamaica and the Virgin Islands. And I say the Caribbean because we have artists from Antigua, we have artists from Guyana, we have artists from St. Lucia, we have artists from St. Eustatius, St. Croix, St. Thomas, and so Jamaica and the Caribbean. Every Wednesday, 3 to 5 Pacific Standard Time, 6 to 8 Eastern Standard Time, Taste of Consciousness with Selecta AD, the BAMBU King.
Nice. And on an ending note, I know you saw the video, Steel Pulses, our favorite band out there, and shout out to Judahites and Ithaca,
Right.
New York. I know you're getting acquainted with him via the internet. He also has a radio show on up at the Ithaca University. I forget that I don't have it written down, but if you go on the interview I did with him, we talk about it. But shout out to him for bringing so many, especially Midnight. When I was talking to him when I first moved back up in 2006, I didn't know where, because where we're at in DC. I'm a transplant. You know what I'm saying? That's for all you Syracuse folks. I'll give you a little joke. Y'all know I'm a transplant. I was born in Syracuse, but damn it, I was rooted in DC. So I'm what you call a transplant, and that's cool. I can live with that because that's what I am. I'm a good one though. I'm a good one that didn't forget where he came from, has very fond memories of Syracuse, loves Syracuse deeply, and that's why I'm back up here. And so when I went to Ithaca, people were telling me, they got a nice platform and Ithaca of reggae, and that's when I started. I was like, "Ooh, they bringing Midnight hit there on a, they were bringing them there on a regular basis." And once I came back up here, you know, Soldier was coming up here, started coming up here left and right to see me. Bless their hearts, bless Soldiers' hearts. But when my favorite band, Steel Pulse, when they came to Ithaca not too long ago, I was elated. And Judahites, thank you so much, my brother, for bringing. He allows me to do interviews. He don't give me no pride. He don't kick me out. You know, give maximum respect to him for allowing me to do what I really love to do. And that's, you know, conduct my interviews and messaging the music and so forth. And just, I know that you consider them the best reggae band of all time. Now, you're a historian and on so many levels, so I would just like for you to end it, and please don't be too long-winded, because you'll turn this into, give us a little, you know, a little history on Steel Pulse and what makes them so special.
Well, yeah. Well, Steel Pulse is my favorite band, is my favorite reggae band, like roots reggae band of all time. And I think that one of the best reggae albums of all time, if not the best reggae album of all time, is True Democracy, which I believe was their fifth album. It was, or no, fourth album, because it went Hands With Revolution, which is incredibly, their first five albums are just impeccable. Their first five albums are some of the best reggae albums that have ever been released, best songs that have ever been released. They're the most unique, one of the most unique reggae bands of all time, because of the compositions that they made and the aspects of actual musical development, the call and response and the intros and the outros and the bridges and the crescendos. They didn't strip it down to just like just a chorus and a verse, or even just a long riff, which a lot, you know, nothing against the simplicity of some of those songs and albums and artists. And, you know, I love Roots Radix, and I love Soul Dimension. I love Studio One and Channel One and all of these great things that have a more little simplified approach at creating a medium for artists to sing on. But Steel Pulse was second to none. They were a UK reggae band from the late 70s. And even compared to other UK reggae groups of the time, Aswad, Matumbe, Capital Letters, Alphabet, the Reggae Regular, the Cimarrons, Black Slate, Black Symbol, Black Roots. There's tons of really good UK roots groups that don't get the shine or recognition that they really deserve. But Steel Pulse stood heads and shoulders in their own class of reggae artists. There was no Jamaican bands that sounded like Steel Pulse. There was no other UK bands that sounded like Steel Pulse. They were one of a kind. And I mean, Hands With Revolution, incredible album. Tribute to the Martyrs, incredible album. Rumors, Caught You Dancing, incredible album. True Democracy, like I said, True Democracy, I mean, is probably the best reggae album of all time, and produced in such a way that I actually think, to be totally honest, on the critical side of things, because, you know, I got to bring balance, I think their first few albums, as good as those albums were, and as incredible and unique and original as those songs were, I do think those first few albums suffered from the lack of production finesse that True Democracy had. True Democracy had just, it was dialed, it was like the gold standard of production at the time, and then Earth Crisis after True Democracy. And all of those albums are some of the most classic albums in reggae history, and some of the most militant albums, in the same way we were talking about Bon Benjamin earlier, talking about how he was, I think we were on the air when we were talking about it, but he coming outside of just the Rastafari perspective to expand into a vaster realm of Black consciousness and pulling from different aspects of current history, ancient history, political perspective, rebel music, and the Rastafarian, biblical-based interpretation of that Black liberation theology, created something so genuinely original and non-cliche and non-imitated and unique that to this very day, I mean, I've heard artists from all sorts, from America, from Hawaii, from Europe, from Africa, from Jamaica, who obviously were heavily influenced by Steel Pulse. I don't think you probably don't have the competence of a competent reggae musician if you didn't get influenced by Steel Pulse in some kind of a way. And even though they weren't born Jamaicans, they were like children of the Windrush generation, the Jamaicans that migrated to the UK, who developed the sound system and reggae and roots reggae culture in the UK in the late 70s, early 80s. They, I mean, second to none. They had such a unique presentation of their music that as a musician myself, someone who tries to learn Bob Marley and the Wailers and culture and Burning Spear and all that, like Steel Pulse is some of the stuff I struggle with the most because of how dynamic the composition of their songs are and how freewheeling the musicians are in doing unique takes on it. It's not syncopated cookie cutter rhythms. It's compositions. It's orchestrated compositions that are so good. So yeah, I love Steel Pulse. I can't, big up Bumba Selwyn Brown, big up Grizzly Nesbitt, peace be upon him, big up David Hines, big up, Ronnie McQueen, still going, original bass player of Steel Pulse. So I'm constantly trying to decipher and reverse engineer what he's doing. I'm just like, man, this man was a beast, and still is going, Ronnie McQueen. And so, enough love and respect going out to the Steel Pulse family. I'm not convinced that I would be the person I am and the devout reggae aficionado that I am told that I am and certainly feel to be, considering how I've spent the last 20, 25, 2.5 decades of my life. If it wasn't for Steel Pulse, if it wasn't for the influence of Steel Pulse and roping me back in, every time I think I've heard too much reggae or I've listened to this song or listened to this album too many times, I put on a Steel Pulse album on my record player, and I feel that titillating intrigue and excitement that I felt as a young teenager, as like a 14, 15-year-old listening to roots reggae for the first time in my life, listening to Bob Marley and the Wailers, listening to Steel Pulse and Burning Spear and Israel Vibration for the first time, and how it literally hijacked my life into the pursuit of, I don't know what it's going to be, but I want to be involved with reggae music. I want to be involved with sharing reggae music, inspiring people with reggae music, sharing the inspiration that I've felt in my personal life from reggae music and Rastafari through reggae music. And Steel Pulse is a major player in my life journey when it comes to my infatuation and deep love and reverence of the King's sound, or the King's music, reggae music. So yeah, don't miss out. If you don't know, now you know. Hands with Revolution, Tribute to the Martyrs, Rumors, Caught You Dancing. It's one album, also called Reggae Fever. True Democracy, True Democracy, and Earth Crisis, which is more, put on Earth Crisis. You want to think, you want to embolden your conspiracy that time travel is a real thing, that someone got a time machine somewhere. Well, it's probably David Hines, because you listen to Earth Crisis and you're like, this is now. This is relevant right now. This is more relevant now than it probably even was when they made the album. And Wild Goose Chase, Earth Crisis, Bodyguard. Can't feel sorry for the Bodyguard, and so it's just, there we are. Like, if you don't know, if you've been deprived of some of the best reggae music and most original reggae music you'll ever hear in your life till the end of time, do yourself a favor, and at the very least, listen to the first handful of Steel Pulse albums. And in all honesty, the last couple albums they've released in the last, I think it's only been 2 in like the last 20 years. I remember, Baba, before we took off from the East, or I mean, you're still in the East, but like before we took off from DC area, they had just come out with African Holocaust, which is an incredible album. And the last album is Mass Manipulation. Ain't that it? I believe the last album was Mass Manipulation that just came out. And solid albums. So good. So, and it's a different sound from the old root sound, but the message is strong. The meaning in the songs is just as strong as ever. And even at the time in the 80s and early 90s, when they might have sonically started falling away from the fundamentals of like roots reggae in favor of the contemporary music of the day, which was probably more an influence of producers and labels and radio impact on their productions than anything else, just like with everyone. It became more digital, didn't have the real drums, a lot more synthesizer. It became a little bit more poppy and everything. Even when that happened briefly in the 80s and early 90s, you better believe they turned around and came out with an album, Back to My Roots, and came right back around and called themselves out on, I'm coming back to my roots, roots reggae rub-a-dub. I'm coming right back to my roots, and so it takes a bold person to not only admit when they're, I'm not even going to necessarily say wrong, because they were just going with the flow of the vehicle in which they were in, but even when you find shortcoming in the trajectory that you're on, and you turn around and not only admit it yourself out of your mouth, but make productions that are going to be timeless, set in stone about it. I mean, that's a special person, that's a special band, and that's a special level of integrity that a lot of artists probably don't have. Not that they can't have it, but I know beyond any reasonable shadow of a doubt that David Hines and Selwyn Brown and all of the Steel Pulse family, they definitely had it, and they came right back around, back to my roots. Vex, Rage and Fury, one of my favorite albums of the 90s. Rage and Fury, such a good album. There go the Kingman right there. And so, yeah, Steel Pulse, second to none. There is no other. Often imitated, never recreated. Often imitated, never replicated. Only one created. Thank you so much to David Hines, Selwyn Brown, the whole of the Steel Pulse family, and big up Amlak Tafari, big up all the artists, the musicians that hold down the Steel Pulse legacy today, because they're all incredible, impeccable musicians who love what they do and do it with their whole heart. I know you know that about Amlak Tafari. Big up Amlak Tafari each and every time. Enough respect due. They often imitated, never duplicated that one. He's a one of a kind right there. So, yeah, Steel Pulse. Don't sleep. Don't get caught sleeping. Now's the time. Earth Crisis.
Beautiful. And on the screen, family, I couldn't go without getting the info. Is WICB, Reggae Explosion, Thursdays from 10 to 12, Ithaca, New York. You type that right in, Google it. I think it's wicp.org. You type that right in, and it'll come right up. And shout out to Brother Judah Ives. We appreciate you, brother. You've been out there for a minute doing what you do. And he's a skateboardist, man. He came to Syracuse with his skateboard.
Yeah.
Man, he's got to be like my age almost. Man, he made me want to go back. I said, I got to exercise. He running up and down the street with that skateboard. Enough liberty. Yo, the man have enough liberty, came, didn't care who was at liberty. I was like,
witness the fitness. You got to witness the fitness.
Yeah, he got much liberty. So much respect to our brother Judah Ites. Hopefully the Bamboo King can link with you. That would be a good thing. He maybe can get to Ithaca maybe one of the times when you do the reggae festival, Ithaca Reggae Festival. That would be a view. Maybe I'll bring him on in. I might have to bring him and his wife on in. Maybe they'll come. I'm gonna have
to convince Michael Leslie to let me tag along when he starts doing it.
Yes, come on, Michael. Come on, man. So I enjoyed this. You were very balanced as you always are, and you speak the truth. And as the Quran says, speak the truth, even if it's against yourself. And you do that. You always do that, and you express. You give a way out at the end, and that's beautiful because what you ultimately expressed is the kingdom of God. Who wouldn't want to be a part of that? But as we all know, the kingdom is to come. It certainly hasn't arrived. So with that being said, my dear brother, and to the family out there, until next time, don't make it too long.
Won't be. I know it's stacked up. We've had it stack up way too much over the last few years and not gotten anything out to the people. I just want to make sure that I'm on point with bringing something of service, of value, a valuable content to Baba
TV. For the 2-3 videos, he has a whole playlist on Baba TV, but there's 2 or 3 videos that was so raw. Namely, like when he dealt with a lot of the vaccines, YouTube didn't like that. So you go on Rumble and type in the Bamboo King or Baba TV Every Time Fire, but tap on his channel, the Bamboo King on Rumble, and you will see those 6-hour, 5-hour long videos that are no longer on Baba TV, that he went in with the research, with facts, proof, and evidence and receipts, and much of what he said is now coming to pass today. If you don't believe me, go check it out on Rumble, the Bamboo King on Rumble. With that being said, shout out to your lovely wife. Tell her I said peace always, and we gonna leave. I'm not gonna play no music because I like to get it right. I gotta talk to Doggy Diamonds. Doggy Diamonds is a beast on this internet. He knows how to DJ and get it to sound it right. I haven't learned how to do that right quite yet, so I'm not gonna even do it. So with that being said, peace, family. We out.